Hello, audience. Nice seeing you. How is
Hello.
everyone doing?
Super
Hey.
awesome.
Hi, Pete. Hey,
Hi.
Rich. Hey, Richard. While we give folks a little bit of time to join, audience, if you're here, go to the chat and let us know where you're calling from. We love to hear. And let me do a quick icebreaker. Let me ask Pete and Richard, what's your favorite spot to visit in San Francisco? Pete, in the weekends, and LA for you, Richard. What do you like doing?
I'm pretty boring. In our sales team meeting, we do a like, what was your highlight of your weekend? Just so like that's kind of the icebreaker in our sales team meeting, and what we do, and just such that everybody can kind of like, get a view and everybody else's kind of like personal life and their hobbies or whatever. And like, I'm the boringest thing ever because I have a 5-year-old Mikey, and every time it's like, yep, Mikey and I went to the California Academy of Sciences. Yep, Mikey and I went to the California Academy of Sciences. So it's like
It's pretty
pretty
cool
much,
though.
yeah, it's like pretty much the go-to, but it's really big, so you can go to like different spots, right? So we definitely
Hmm.
spent like an hour with him sitting in front of a bunch of gemstones, like drawing them this
That's pretty
last
cool.
weekend. And then he was like, "Which one is this, Daddy?" And I had to like go find it amongst them. So that's like that's our go-to. Richard, what's your favorite spot to hit up in LA?
Yeah, first I'll say that doesn't sound boring at all. I would love to go to the Science
It's
Center every weekend. Sounds amazing.
pretty rad.
Yeah, for my favorite spot in LA, I've got to say Koreatown, shorthand
Oh,
K-Town here in LA, and
so good.
mostly it's the food. The food is unmatched. It's unbeatable. Um, it's very much so the best Korean food probably in the States, and it could contest for the world, I think. So, just like a really, really great spot for us to hang out and just, not only go to restaurants but get groceries. It's a great spot for food.
Awesome.
K-Town is the bomb. Love K-Town.
It's so good.
It's so great.
Yeah,
And it's got a subway now too that like you can take it off to the west side, right? Am I remembering that correctly, or maybe I'm off? It's awesome.
I think it's probably planned. The public transit's funny. We were just talking backstage about New York, because Eduardo was based in New York, and the metro system out there, and I was just lamenting in my head how poor it is on the west coast compared to New York. But yeah, I think it isn't planned because they're going to be hosting like some major events out here in LA, like the World Cup when it comes around again. So there are some infrastructure plans for that.
Eduardo, what's your favorite place to hit up in New York?
well, since I have a dog and she really likes to go out, we spend the weekends basically going on parks around the city. I have 3 parks near my apartment, which is kind of crazy for New York City. And we also like hiking, so that's my go-to.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah,
And
we're
I love
pretty
seeing pictures of
outdoors.
Luna. She's the cutest thing ever.
Thank you. Alrighty, so let's start today. We are here today to talk about how to pivot to an efficiency first sales org with Pete Kazanjy, and our audience. You're in for a treat because Pete brought a friend today. We have Richard joining me
Yay,
here today.
friends.
Yeah, we love friends too. And today's event is brought to you by the team at Modern Sales Pros. For those of you not familiar with MSP, you are missing out because we are the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and sales enablement, aka our modern sales pros. And our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they would struggle to solve on their own and help them see around corners they might not know about. And we do that through live sessions like this one you're about to experience with Pete and Richard. We have a robust online forum with a lot of people participating and answering all your questions. We have quarterly summits, and we are starting to get back to in-person events, which is very, very exciting.
Woohoo.
If you're not already part of the MSP community, you will be invited to join right after this event. And as I mentioned, we have quarterly summits, and we just had one in October, and it was fantastic, wasn't it, Pete? It
Oh,
was amazing.
it was absolutely amazing. Sorry, someone's
Yeah.
blowing me up on Slack right now. My bad.
Oh, no worries.
It was absolutely
Uh,
fantastic.
Yeah, but if you love this content today here in this masterclass, you will love all the content from the summit. The summit happened from October 11th through the 13th, and we put together 25 events of fantastic content and the
It was so
speakers.
great.
You can hear from leaders from HighSpark, Insight, Cowboy Ventures, and Winning by Design, as well as Lattice, Pendo, Outreach, Atrium, and much more. It cannot get better than this.
And you were the
Um,
content orchestrator. You were the puppet master who made it all
I
happen. It
was
was
there.
awesome. It was
Yeah,
badass.
I participated a little bit. Um, But let's focus now on this session here. We want you audience to get the most out of it. So this panel is being recorded. We cannot let all this knowledge that Pete and Richard will share here today to go to the ether. So it will be recorded and you will be able to access the recording in the previous events page on the MSP website. And you also will receive a follow-up email with the link. And please use the Q&A panel or the chat box to ask all the questions. It's not always that you see Pete available to answer your questions. So please, let's use him. He loves answering questions. And that's enough from me. That's now the fun part of this event when I shut up and I pass the mic to Pete and Richard because you are here to hear from them. So Pete, you can take it from here, and then you can introduce us to Atrium, our sponsor for this event, and then introduce yourself and Richard, and then we can start things off.
I love it. Thank you, Eduardo. I appreciate it. Thank you for making all the trains run on time as usual.
Yep.
Um, hey, folks, I'm Pete Kazanjy. I'm one of the founders of Atrium. For folks who don't know, Atrium makes data-driven sales management software. It's software that helps sales organizations, so sales managers, leaders, and reps use metrics to measure and improve performance. And one of the super cool things about Atrium is it takes 5 minutes to set up out of the box. Just sign in with a read-only connection to your Salesforce account and presto changeo. Within a few minutes, you've got a world-class metrics harness telling you how your reps are performing, your SDRs, AEs, AMs, CSMs are performing across 100 plus metrics. So pretty fun stuff. It's like Moneyball for sales reps. I am super pumped to have an illustrious colleague of mine here today, Richard, who is one of our senior CSMs here. I'm going to just introduce myself really quick, a little bit of background, and then Richard will introduce himself, and we'll get into some of this. Talking about pivoting to an efficiency for a sales organization. As I noted earlier, I am one of the founders of Atrium, but prior to Atrium, I started a recruiting software company called TalentBin back in, geez Louise, 2011. That was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. And that's really kind of where I got into kind of like modern sales, if you will. I was our first, like, in addition to being the founder at TalentBin, I was our first seller, first sales manager, first sales leader. And that's kind of like how I got into this like whole process oriented, analytically excellent sales, kind of what I call modern sales game. After TalentBin was acquired, I wrote a book on startup sales called Founding Sales, and then started Modern Sales Pros as well. So that's a little bit on me. Richard, maybe you could share with everybody what you spend your time doing here at Atrium, and then some of the things that you did before.
Of course. Thank you, Pete. Hi, everyone. It's really, really great to see you all here to be with you today. My name is Richard Lynn. I'm a senior CSM here at Atrium. I spend my days looking after some of our larger customer organizations, not only helping them be successful using Atrium, our software, but also helping them on their evolutions to becoming really, really rigorously data-driven sales organizations. Prior to Atrium, I did a number of years doing data infrastructure as well as sales strategy and finance before wanting to come to a smaller shop that was essentially productizing what I was doing as a job before. So found myself at Atrium, and in about a week and a half, I will have been at the organization for 1 year. So super excited for that milestone. Back to you, Pete.
Lucky us. Thank you, Richard. So for folks who might be interested, we're offering attendees a pack of fun, what we call a sales leader survival guide. Kind of selling in economic turbulent times kind of deserves that. What it involves is a Coffee is for Coaches Yeti mug, a copy of the Qualified Sales Leader by John McMahon, and some desk references as well. We're going to go ahead and drop a link here in the chat for folks to sign up for that. And then, so just go ahead and do that. And then all we ask in exchange is for a quick disco chat with one of our AEs. Wonderful. So pivoting to an efficiency first sales organization. I'm excited about this because I think that this is something that's like long overdue in our industry. essentially a lot of organizations are thinking about how they need to change from a grow mindset, regardless of the efficiency or the attainment of their various reps, to a more measured kind of like slow growth or efficient growth mindset here. And so we're going to be talking about how you can do that from a data-driven sales management standpoint here in throughout this presentation. But these are kind of the topics we're going to be covering. So pivoting from growth first to efficiency first, finding new baselines for your sales motions, and then driving effort and efficiency in your various teams. And then if needed, what does right sizing your sales organization look like? Because this is something that's top of mind for a lot of folks here. So first, let's go ahead and talk about pivoting from growth first to efficiency first. And so I think one of the things that a lot of at least over the last like 5 years or so, a lot of folks have been pouring available capital into revenue growth in ways that like maybe not the most efficient in the world. And so right now, because capital is getting more scarce with interest rates rising, the hurdle rate and kind of like return on investment that is required associated with the outlay of money is higher now. And so what that means is there's kind of like a transition happening from the way that people used to think about this stuff previously to how folks now are thinking about things. And so that has a lot of implications, right? So in the old world, that would mean a lot more marketing spend, loose prospect budgets, which means high win rates, right? So this is driving lots of inbound. This is driving higher conversion rate on those inbound. Maybe things are being faster from a sales cycle standpoint. There's fewer approvers that have to be involved. Lots of opportunities in the pipe, which also means potentially loose hygiene from AE standpoint, kind of more lackadaisical operational tempos, et cetera, et cetera. And so, and then like a variety of things that kind of come from that. So like hands-off sales management, throw people at things instead of automating stuff. And then, maybe a little bit less urgency than you would expect. It's like, let's see how this works. Let's see how this works, et cetera. Versus kind of making decisions rather quickly, like, this SDR is not working out, this AE is not working out, et cetera. And so now that's really changing, where you're seeing less inbound. The win rates are compressing because of tightened budgets. There's more approvers that need to be involved from a transaction standpoint. Opportunities, because of this, opportunities are a lot scarcer. That means thinner pipes, and that means that pipe management now needs to be way, way, way more rigorous, rather than kind of lackadaisical tempos. It's a higher level of effort in general, and then these have implications from a managerial standpoint. So rather than having hands-off sales management, this is the time for managers to be really hands-on, making sure that they're inspecting what they expect, and then making sure that you're automating things versus throwing humans at it. And for good or for bad, this means making quick decisions on underperforming staff, such that those opportunities or inbound leads or what have you can be handed to folks who are going to do a better job with them. And so there's a couple of different steps that are required for kind of pivoting from growth at all costs to efficiency first. First, you're going to want to figure out new baselines in your sales motion. So now that if win rates are compressed, if sales cycles are elongated, if ASPs are compressing, that's going to mean that you're going to want to figure out what those new baselines look like. Secondarily, you're going to want to drive more effort and efficiency on the part of your team. That means like higher level of effort and higher level of excellence. And then you're going to want to put more look for driving more managerial and operational efficiency. And then potentially what that might mean is also right sizing your sales team as well. Back on this, Richard, when you because you work with a bunch of really cool customers, what are some of the topics that you've heard folks talking about on these fronts?
Yeah, great question, Pete. I think as we look at this list, the ones that stand out to me are the fourth line down, ops being scarce, thin pipes, and from there, rigorously managing your pipeline. A lot of the AE organizations that I've been working with have been laser focused on making sure that we're working everything that we have in pipeline and making sure that nothing's getting stuck, everything's getting their attention. And there's a lot of focus on conversion rate on stage advancement as well. So a lot of focus on pipeline management for AE organizations. And when it comes to SDR teams, just setting diligent activity goals and really boosting the level of effort we have in order to really build that pipeline that the AE teams are ultimately going to feed off of. So yeah, there has been renewed focus, to your point, on these two pieces, and it's been really exciting, frankly, to work on these with them.
Yeah, I'm sure it kind of helps you as a CSM, or kind of trying to teach people to do data-driven sales management and measure these things is something that is something that we work to do, and sometimes people can be a little bit more aloof to that, whereas now there's kind of like a fire that's been lit, like, oh man, I guess we really have to buckle down on what these on what these goals look like, or what have you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Little bit of a tailwind. Nothing motivates like a little bit of nothing motivates like a raise in interest rates, I suppose. Great. So some of the things so the first thing we're going to talk about here is this concept of new baselines. So when something shifts in the market, oftentimes what that means is that there's there will be new realities that show up in your metrics, and so that's important for you to, one, realize what those are, and then that should inform your new reality. And so what that's going to mean is we have to figure out what those new baselines are, then potentially set new goals and quotas associated with those, and then enforce those new baselines. And so kind of some examples of what that might look like when you're doing that. First, what are the KPIs that you want to re-benchmark? On the AE side of things, it's probably the revenue formula. So like bookings, new opportunity inflow, win rate, average selling price, and deal cycle. On the SDR side, that's going to be the pipeline generation formula. So that's going to be things like opportunities created as an output, new accounts engaged, new contacts engaged, ops, and then of course efficiency metrics like ops created per account engaged, which essentially is like SDR win rate, if you will. Jumped to the wrong slide. And then the next question, so like these are the things that we're going to pay attention to, or kind of like re-baseline. And then the second thing would be like, okay, what are the new realities? And so one of the things it's going to be important to do there is kind of think about like what the sampling period might be in order to be aware of that new market reality. It might be anywhere between 30 to 180 days. For AEs, that's certainly going to be like at least one sales cycle, maybe longer. For long sales cycles, it's probably going to be pretty tough to instrument that in any meaningful way from a lagging indicator standpoint, which is why instrumenting the precursors is all the more important. And so just kind of give some examples of what this might look like here. This is an example of an account executive team whose first meeting dropped down by about 50% here over a period of weeks. And then this is actually an SDR team whose email engagement rate, which is essentially just like a fancy version of email response rate, dropped down about 50% as well, where when prospects are being less responsive because their heads, kind of like what we mentioned up here, if prospects are heads down because they know that there's no budget to buy anything, well, they're going to be less responsive to you. So these are just kind of like two examples of metrics moving in a way that would have impacts on the outputs of those activities. And so, this is the AE revenue formula here. So bookings comes out of total carrying capacity, so the number of ops that they're working, the win rate, and then the deal cycle. The ASP, the average sales cycle, average selling price, and then divided out by the deal cycle there. And then the same thing happens over here on the SDR side of things, where sales accepted opportunities come from SAO acceptance rates crossed with ops created, and ops created come from the number of accounts that are engaged, crossed with the accounts engaged to op creation ratio. So these are as these KPIs change or shift right here, that's going to inform these formulas right here, and then drop out different outputs there. So a good way of approaching this is to say, hey, and these are worksheets here. You could say, hey, my goal period was, on a monthly basis, or sorry, my goal period is on a monthly basis, the number of bookings that I'm expecting, or maybe it's quarterly if you have a longer deal cycle. I'm going to sample in a trailing 90-day period and see what the old KPI was, and then have the look at the new KPI is there, because that will then inform what your outputs look like there. So the next thing we want to do is figure out what the right sampling period is in order to understand what that quote unquote new normal looks like. There's a couple of things just to kind of be mindful of there, which is how long you how the size of the sampling period is going to be contingent on kind of like the volume of kind of like activity that's happening. So for instance, if you have a large number of reps, you're probably going to be able to see some good statistically significant data in a short amount of time. If you have a fast sales motion velocity, you're probably going to be able to see things a little bit more quickly than if you have a slow sales motion. And then if you're looking at precursor metrics versus output metrics, that's going to be something that's going to show up more quickly. Like, so for instance, we were looking at first meetings above. That's going to show up pretty quickly, is a change in first meetings for your AEs. Whereas if you're looking at the number of proposals that are being sent, so the number of stage of opportunities to get to the stage proposal, that's going to be something that's probably not, that doesn't show up until the end of a sales cycle. And so that would probably only start showing up in your data like a sales cycle out from any sort of change in the market. So these are just things to be mindful of here. You can kind of see this again. Email engagement rate's a good precursor metric, because people are responding or not responding to email like pretty quickly, and so you can see this is like a pretty quick shift here of email responsiveness there. Same with kind of like activity per opportunity created. This is again like an SDR metric. So because SDR sales motion is quick, and then also this is a 50 rep sales organization or 50 SDR sales organization right here. You can see that the data kind of shifted pretty quickly there. The other thing that you're going to want to do too is like when you're doing this this sampling, is you just want to make sure that it actually is an average, right? An actual average there, where you might have some folks that are kind of like pulling things down, but then you might have other folks who are not. And so just making sure, like, this is why it's important not just to look at like averages, but also to look at the individuals as well, because you might have some folks that are being particularly negatively impacted, and they may not actually end up being at the organization for the long term. And so you'd probably what you want to do is just like eyeball where that that intended average might end up there. So then the next thing that you're going to do is, like, once you've got a sense of what that new kind of like normal looks like based on the appropriate sampling period and based on a per metric basis, what you might then do is that might change to new quotas. It also, or not, right? Like you might just change behaviors to accommodate. Also, what you want to do is make sure that you're publishing these new goals and expectations to the team, and then driving accountability on that. And we're going to talk a little bit about that more here in a second here. But the important thing is, like, when these things shift, we want to get this information in order to say, hey, what should we expect folks to be doing, and then push that out to the team and drive accountability on that. And so that's kind of going to bring us to our next section here, which is driving effort and efficiency in AE and SDR teams. And so this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is, like, when you have an easy money environment, or you have an easy money, or when you have an easy money environment, oftentimes that impacts just the level of effort that people engage in. Like, one of the things I was joking with somebody the other day is, like, anytime you have a mention of a 4-day work week, you're probably nearing the top of the market, right? And so when things change, and there are negative economic shocks, there's an opportunity to drive a more appropriate level of effort and efficiency. so what that means is like understanding what is the correct level of effort, because maybe the previous level of effort was not the correct level of effort. It was negatively impacted by by a mirage essentially, and the same is true with efficiency level as well. So the level of prior win rates or prior levels of like pipeline hygiene or what have you, that's the old. What's the new here? And then you have to understand how to instrument that and enforce that. And so these are some of the metrics that you might be looking at for level of effort, and then level of excellence or efficiency. Effort, of course, are things like that you can count, right? They kind of count up. So like with SDRs, that might be emails, calls, unique number of contacts that are being touched, unique number of accounts that are being touched, new accounts that are being touched, new contacts that are being touched. For account executives, that would be things like number of customer-facing meetings, number of accounts or ops that are being interacted with, and even things like email volume and what have you. All of these are like activity centric. And then when you look at efficiencies, so what these are measures of quality. And so with SDRs, that might be things like email responsiveness rates, or these are ratios, the number of contacts that are engaged on a per account basis. Right, like multi-threading into accounts. With account executives, this would be things like win rates, average selling price, deal cycle, untouched opportunities around pipe hygiene, stuck ops, multi-threading as well. Richard, when you're working with your your various customers here, what are some of the metrics that they're most kind of clued into when it comes to driving higher levels of effort and higher levels of efficiency?
Yeah, for SDR organizations, we really just stick with top line activities, calls, emails, meetings booked. Those are the easiest to measure, the most tangible that both managers as well as reps can really get after. From there, we'll get into a couple of more, we call them double black diamonds here at Atrium, more advanced metrics around efficiency. We looked at activity per op created. So that's a really great one for SDR leadership to look at. For AE teams, kind of my favorite version, something that has been given a little bit more focus these days, given the macro environment, has been the path to quota, as we like to call it, or sales math. And for folks on the call here, if you've gotten your laminate with your AE metrics inspection guide, it really follows that framework of how many opportunities do we have, what's our win rate, what's our ASP. And right now, as folks are kind of looking back and rethinking those baselines, really locking in what they're expecting from an assumptions perspective, getting those out in front of the reps and making sure that they perform to those numbers has been really, really popular of late.
Love it. Cool. So let's talk about these new standards around level of effort here. So the way that I kind of like to describe this is moving from a quote unquote marathon pace, like, hey, I just want to make sure that I'm doing like 8-minute miles, to like, oh my goodness, there's a bear behind me. And so these would be things like paying attention to the level of effort. So now is an opportunity to instrument and set clear expectations on level of effort metrics. Maybe previously that was something in your organization that you might have been, resistant to do. Like, oh, as long as people are hitting their bookings goals, we don't care how many customer-facing meetings they have, which my point of view on that is that that's a ridiculous sentence in any environment, but maybe now it's an opportunity to to turn over a new leaf there. And so things that would kind of examples of that would be on the AE side: external meetings, email volumes, opportunity touches, number. Like oftentimes AE prospecting is a hot button topic. As SDR ratios compress. So prospecting accounts engaged, prospecting emails, those sort of things. On the SDR side, it's really going to be things like emails, calls, accounts touch, and contacts touch. And so the way that you want to do this is you want to look at top performers and like look at historical and current levels of the top performers to understand what's possible. And so what I mean by that is you'd be surprised how much level of variability there is in a lot of these metrics. So this is this is anonymized customer data here at Atrium. You can see this is like a 20-ish or 15-ish person sales team, AE team right here. You can really see some pretty big deltas between levels of customer facing meeting volumes in the trailing 30 days, where you can see like these are kind of the top performers here are at, north of 25 customer facing meetings on a trailing 30-day basis. Now, the funny thing is my response to that is like, that's actually not, from a benchmarking standpoint, that's like not very amazing. AE should probably be having around like 15 customer facing meetings a week or better, but for good or for bad. But what you can see here is like you have a set of folks who are up here, then you kind of have this like average down here, and then you have a handful of folks that are just like kind of bringing up the rear. And so like in this case, what you would say is like we have an expectation, you would set an expectation in this realm right here in order to drag up these folks who are kind of underperforming. And then moreover, if these folks can't get on the train, they're probably not going to be long for the organization. You can see the same thing here on the unique number of accounts that have been touched. You can see it's kind of a similar situation here with like email volume as well. You can see again some folks that are pretty substantially light with respect to email volume as compared to others. And like you'd be surprised, like you get this level of variation, especially, I mean, one of the things that we end up observing in our customers, and you see this before Atrium is deployed versus after Atrium is deployed, in well-run organizations, you have much more tightly banded groups of folks where like they're engaging in the same behaviors and then so the metrics end up kind of being pretty similar. In organizations that are not very data driven, you get a lot of this sort of like all over the place, all over the map kind of situation here. So that's a little bit of that, and the same is true over on SDR side as well. So you can see SDR email volume here, SDR call volume here. You can see again the same sort of like levels of variability, unique account engagement, et cetera. And so what you can do is you can say, hey, what are the like? I'm going to set a new line, right, that's like above the mid performer tier, maybe not all the way at the top performer tier, because that like you want these things to be attainable, and that's going to be the new expectation that we're going to publish out. You can do the same thing on what we call standards of excellence and efficiency as well, which is important because you're moving from a mindset of, hey, you know what, there's more inbound leads where that came from, or hey, you know what, there's more opportunities that are going to be coming inbound, I'm just going to close lost this one, or maybe I don't need to manage this one like super great, right? And so this is an opportunity to pay attention to those levels of excellence and efficiency, kind of this, and turn over a new leaf the same way that we would did that with level of effort. Some examples of metrics there would be things like untouched opportunities for account executives, contacts per account. So how well somebody is multi-threading into an account is a really good indication of how well they're selling it. Opportunity health, and then opportunity conversion rates. And on the SDR side of things, these would be things like email responsiveness rates, accounts touch to op creation rates, touches per account, right? So how frequently an SDR is engaging with a given account, and then the number of contacts that they're multi-threading into, again, like the account executives here. Richard, when you've been working with your customers, any kind of like fan favorites in here that have been like hot button topics recently?
Contacts touch per account or multi-threading. Pete, you and I actually exchanged a note on this for one of our customers earlier this week, but on the SDR front, just making sure that you're diligently multi-threading, you're making sure that in an environment like this where the free money's gone, the interest rates are high, the capital's not flowing anymore, you're really going to have to get multiple folks buying in order to get a deal done and even to get an opportunity created. And then on the AE side of the house, opportunity health, as well as stuck opportunities, untouched ops, all the pipeline hygiene stuff I mentioned earlier, just making sure that the stuff that is on your plate, you're attacking it, you're giving it the attention that it deserves, and we're not leaving anything on the vine, so to speak.
Yeah. William has a great question here around like, do you have any general rules of thumb in the increase in productivity, moving to efficiency first? I mean, I think that the important thing there is to just like set expectations, right? This is oftentimes like as leaders, like historically, if you're worried about reps departing or what have you, you may have historically like resisted saying like, hey Lumpy, hey Squeaks the Caterpillar. Sorry, these are like ridiculous names here. This is a demo anonymized data. Like we need you to be at 25 customer facing meetings, or because that's the expectation, or you're not going to be here anymore. I think the first thing is just like setting expectations by like looking at the data. Guys, like I'm not making this up, right? Like, look, your colleagues do this, and then as Richard was kind of noting earlier, and this is how you're going to get to the level of quota that is required. Like, I'm not making this up because I'm the big bad bear. I'm showing you this because your colleagues can do this, and this is the only way that you're going to be able to get to your quota. So, being transparent with that data can help with that, such that people kind of like wrap their mind around the fact that it's not just like, William McDermott being kind of grumpy or Pete Kazanjy being grumpy, but instead like here it is in front of us. Like I think that's a really good approach in uh, I think that's a really good approach. And I think William had another question here, is like, what's your experience with the percentage of sales folks making the proper transition, going from a really laid back environment to a more driven high metrics environment? I mean, I think the response to that, like, and we'll talk about this a little bit further on when we talk about kind of right sizing your sales organizations. I mean, my point of view on that is that as a leader, is that people want to work, like high quality people want to work in a high quality environment with other high quality folks who are in it together to all kick ass. And generally speaking, like the folks who are resistant to that, like you just don't want them on your team. And then moreover, like your other high performers, they really don't want those people on their team, right? They bum them out. Um, and so I think the answer to your question is that like this is an opportunity to like raise that level of excellence. And then for folks who are just not really in it to win it, it's okay if they wash out. So it's less about like the yield retention, and it's more about making sure that you're retaining the right people. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in the kind of the right sizing section of this. So let's talk a little bit more about standards of excellence and efficiency. So same sort of exercise that we did up here, but instead what we're looking at is these levels of efficiency metrics. What you can see here, this is like untouched opportunities here, and you can kind of see which reps are on top of their pipe and which reps are like naughty here. In this case, it's pretty clear that you should set a bar under 10 untouched opportunities, and for folks who can't make that, no more opportunities for you. You can kind of see the same thing going on here with contacts engaged per account. You can see these reps right here are quite good at multi-threading. They're north of 3 contacts being engaged per account. The mid-tier here is around 2.5, and then you have some laggards. So, setting a goal at 2.5 or 2.7 would pull everybody up here. Same with opportunity conversion rates here, where we can see like this is a fancier Atrium KPI. These are the stages down here at the bottom. Your stage names would be in here, and then these are the conversion rates from each stage. So you can see that these reps down here struggle just pretty much across the board to convert things. That would lead to a pretty low win rate in general. You can see some other things here where this friend owl here has low conversion rates until he gets to the end here. So helping him down here to do a better job of converting more, such that he can convert more up here would be good. But these would be examples of places like, these are the conversion rates that we would probably want to set expectations on. And then on the SDR side, again, you have email responsiveness rates here. You can see pretty quickly that there are some reps who do a poor job of eliciting responsiveness, and you have other folks who are much better there. So setting a goal around like 15% here, and then holding people accountable to that, saying, hey, is your messaging as good as it should be? Are your subject lines any good? Are you selecting the right contacts? All of those would kind of drive higher performance here. Cool. And then account to op creation rate. So this is a conversion rate between the number of accounts that have been engaged and the number of ops that have come out of it. It's essentially like a batting average. And again, you can kind of see you have some folks who are pretty low conversion rate here. You can imagine if we gave their accounts to some of these other folks, we'd probably get more opportunities out of the accounts that we're engaging. right? And oftentimes that's highly correlated to how frequently folks are engaging different accounts there. Cool. So one of the things you can do, so this was kind of like tops down here, where we were looking at, or sorry, benchmarking is what I mean to say. Like these are benchmarks here. We can say, hey, these reps are doing this right here. I know that you can do it as a result. Another way you can do this too is you can do bottoms up level of effort and level of excellence setting. So you can say, let's use AEs as an example. How many meetings does an op take to work? In general, like, is it 5? Is it whatever? What other works does an AE have to do between meetings? Do they have to do a bunch of RFPs or product configuration or what have you? This would then tell you how many opportunities an AE can carry before they start dropping balls, right? Because how many meetings per op, and then how much time there is in the week crossed with this other time would then tell you how many ops they can carry based on that meeting volume. And then you can kind of just break it down and add it up there. So this is kind of related to what Richard was talking about earlier around path to quota there. So then once we have this in place, next what we'd want to do is implement a metrics harness such that we can make sure that folks are actually hitting those levels of efficiency and efficiency and effort that we had specified earlier. This is where Atrium is extremely helpful. It takes 5 minutes to set up an absolutely fantastic metrics harness to instrument those levels of effort and level of efficiency. And then one of the things you want to do is just make sure that you're distributing that as much as possible. Richard, when you think about kind of like setting up a metrics harness and then distributing it, where are the places where your customers have the most success in really getting visibility on these things and driving accountability such that people are like reacting and taking action associated with it?
Yeah, I think that the posture that I will typically take with my customers is more visibility is always better, especially in this environment. We have certain goals that we're setting out, and there's really no point in being all cloak and daggery and tracking these on your own. Like, get them out in front of your reps, make it accountable, put it out in leaderboards so folks can kind of hold each other accountable and also encourage each other, and also get a very uplifting feeling when you see yourself at the top of a leaderboard. This goes for top line activities, pipeline hygiene, path to quota, really every kind of metric that we work on here with our customers. I'm always pushing for us to distribute it in a cadence that makes sense, whether it's a daily leaderboard for SDRs or weekly or monthly for things like pipeline hygiene. So big fan of distributing, as you know, and as anyone who's worked with Atrium knows, we're really big on getting it out in front of everyone.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think you described that really well, Richard, where and I needed a better like turn of phrase for this, but it's kind of like I like folks to be aware of a metric at the minimum appropriate time interval, which obviously is like a mouthful, but it's kind of like it doesn't make sense to pay attention to like wins or like deals on a daily basis. Like that's silly. Or even like probably on a rep by rep basis, probably doesn't make sense to pay attention to on a weekly basis. Now, it might be worth paying attention to that for your team on a weekly basis because you've got 10 reps or like 30 reps or whatever. So like that's appropriate. But like untouched opportunities, that's totally appropriate to pay attention to on a weekly basis. And more, because if you only pay attention to it on a monthly basis, you could be at the end of the month and be like, whoa, Bobby's got like 30 untouched ops. Oh my gosh, that's terrible. Have we really been like sitting here like with our head in the clouds for 30 days while he's had 30 untouched ops? Like that's terrible, right? So making sure that you're instrumenting things on the minimally appropriate interval, I think can be very powerful. And then distributions help with that, where like use SDRs as an example, having either a dashboard or a set of views. And we're big fans of what we call micro views here, or sorry, micro dashes here at Atrium, because it's so easy to create new assets. Distributed to SDRs every morning, we're just like, hey man, here's how many calls I got made yesterday, and here's how many emails I got sent yesterday. Here's how many calls so far this week, and here's how many emails so far this week. Boom. Right. And it's like 4 tiles, and like maybe everyone doesn't look at it every morning, but you certainly look at it like every other morning. right? Versus only having an opportunity to look at that like at the end of the week. Well, you potentially could waste an entire week where someone's been decided to like kind of chill out for an entire week, and like you're not gonna get that week back, right? I like that description, Richard. Cool. So let's talk about right sizing your sales organization here. So in some situations, it may just be the reality that that you may have an AE organization or an SDR organization that's like bigger than you need, right? So just based on the amount of inbound they're able to drive, based on the level of efficiency that your AEs are able to execute. Especially in a new environment where things have changed. Like if like your product may not have changed, your sales motion may not have changed, the macroeconomic environment may have changed, and that may make it such that what previously was a market opportunity is no longer a market opportunity. And so if that's the case, or it might be a smaller market opportunity. And so if that's the case, you need to react and size your sales organization on the AE side, on the SDR side, in a way that's appropriate to take advantage of that market opportunity. And so so the first thing is like, okay, which reps should maybe you seek to exit? And so when you're doing that, your decision should really be based on performance KPIs. You should be looking at low performers with respect to outputs. So the lowest performers with respect to bookings on the AE side, or meetings on the or ops created on the SDR side. You don't want to have a long enough sampling period so that noise doesn't necessarily trip you up. You also don't want to get tripped up by an underperforming AE that has had like a single large deal that in a sampling period that like saved one of their months or one of their quarters, especially if that's like not your core sales motion, right? Like if you have a mid-market sales motion with like a 20K ASP, and then someone had like a random 60K deal that like made up for the fact that he's got a low win rate outside of everything else, like you don't want to have that trip you up. And then you also want to make sure that you're not counting ramp against reps unfairly, unless there's like pretty clear outperformance. So now may not be the time to invest in ramping more capacity. So you want to look at bookings related to this. You want to look at bookings and wins to get a complete sense of output. So then once you've kind of determined these like potential reduction candidates, the way that I like to approach this is look at will versus skill issues. So if you have reps who have both will and skill issues, so they've underperformed in will metrics like volume metrics, customer facing meeting volumes, email volumes, things like that, and skill metrics, so they've got like low levels of activity and low win rates. I mean, those reps were probably the ones you were already like worried about and like, I don't know. These should probably be pretty easy calls to make. The next thing you want to look at is folks who have low will like metrics. And so the reason why there is because usually like that's the hardest thing to change. It's very difficult to remediate. Like you can't really fix people who don't want to put in the calories. Like they may not necessarily enjoy the work, or they may have a low level of effort. Is kind of it ends up being a morale drag on the rest of the team. The next step is you'd want to look at skill issues. And so that's where people have like low efficiency metrics, so like low win rates or low ASPs, or their op conversion rates or issues. Usually like these are probably the last folks that you want to cut, because generally speaking, you can probably fix this, right, with good coaching. You can coach them up. It's pretty difficult to like fix people who like don't give a shit. But you may have to dip in this team or into this bucket here, if depending on the level of cuts that you need to make. So let's do let's do like a case study here and kind of do some examples. So this is a set of reps right here. This is a time period between October 2019 and March 2020. You can kind of see like these are the various bookings that have come out of here. Like this rep right here, this rep right here, and this rep right here are kind of the riff candidates. This rep right here is in ramp. So like these are the folks like Mr. Woolensworth, Little Debbie, and Jerry Jumbo. Those are the folks that like are kind of on the bubble. if we go and look at their wins in that time period, because we were saying, hey, is anyone like, getting bailed out? Any of these people up here who are not RIF candidates, are they getting bailed out by like large deals? You can kind of still see it's the same folks. It's like it's what we expected, right? So Mr. Woolensworth, Little Debbie, and Jerry Jumbo are kind of the ones who are lagging there. I guess Blue Fairy here has a little. It seems like they might be getting kind of bailed out a little bit there because her wins are not exactly dramatically higher, but still like kind of leading the pack there. So it would seem that our kind of our RIF candidates are Mr. Woolensworth, Little Debbie, and Jerry Jumbo here. So then what we would want to do is we want to look at like these trends over time to see if there's something that maybe is, we don't want to, if someone's just had like one bad quarter, we might not want to make that move. And again, you can kind of see here that like here's our purple person here, Little Debbie. You can see that she's consistently low there. The blue person here is Mr. Woolensworth, again, kind of consistently low performer. And then Jerry Jumbo here was in ramp, but looks like is a lagged ramp. And so, probably a good RIF candidate here. This rep right here, Alice Bluebonnet, is in ramp, and so it's probably important for us to look at skill and will metrics there, but nothing, it's not like any of these reps right here, like the RIF candidates, had like a dip that was like they weren't up here and then dip down and then like are back up again, which is making it such that they look like they're a RIF candidate. Those folks look pretty consistently low, right? And the same is true with wins. So then now what we would do is look at will metrics, right? And so what we can see again here is like of our RIF candidates, Mr. Woolensworth, Little Debbie, and Jerry Jumbo. It's actually kind of interesting. Like it's not super surprising that Mr. Woolensworth and Jerry Jumbo are kind of light here with respect to customer-facing meeting volume. What is interesting is that that Little Debbie is high here, right? So even though she's kind of light with respect to booking, she certainly is putting in the calories here, which might kind of give us pause. Like if we only needed to offboard 2 reps, this might be the one where you would say like, man, she certainly is putting in the calories here. Maybe we reconsider that. And then you can kind of see the same thing from an accounts touch standpoint. So again, Mr. Woolensworth and Jerry are pretty light here. What's interesting here is that Little Debbie's number of accounts that she's interacting with is actually light as compared to other folks, even in the face of this meeting volume thing. That's probably not surprising because she's probably having lots and lots of second meetings with opportunities that maybe aren't going where she wants them to go. So, which again kind of goes to like more of a skill upskilling situation. So then, of course, we look at our customer-facing meetings, and we can see Mr. Woolensworth again is like fairly low activity across the board. And the same is true with Jerry Jumbo here, who not only has been low across the board, but actually has been degrading over time. This is kind of concerning here. And Little Debbie, of course, is our little our little meeting honey badger up there. So then, lastly, what we would do is we would look at our kind of our last skill metric here, which is win rate. And what we can see is that these folks' win rates they're not actually dramatically off as compared to other folks, right? We can see that Mr. Woolensworth, Little Debbie, and Jerry Jumbo are in line with other folks, which just kind of indicates to us that like, yeah, if these people put in the calories, better things would come out of it there, which kind of tells us that this is really more of a will issue and less of a skill issue. The last thing that you would want to do is look at kind of upcoming rampers. So this is actually, and kind of looking forward at forecasted pipe. So this is a different KPI here, pipeline by close date, that's looking at how much forecasted pipe is coming up in the coming 90 days here. And you can see that this Princess, Kittigosh here has a light forecast as compared to others. And so that would be somebody who like you would feel more comfortable offboarding without without necessarily worrying about like the negative implications associated with that. So the upshot here is like if we were thinking about the above analysis based on the meeting volumes, it really seems that like there was some slack on the team. Like they were doing 50 meetings. It's like a good rule of thumb is like 12 to 15 meetings a week. So that would be 50 a month. If we look at the the meeting volumes that we had seen here on the team previously. Like they're not at that, and so you can imagine like sending some of Mr. Woolenworth and Jerry Jumbo's ops over to higher performing reps. Especially if we look at our win rate here, we can see that Alice Bluebonnet, Principal Majeur, and Chair Mouse here all have much higher win rates. So if we can get the ball to them versus the reps who aren't really putting in the calories, good things will happen. If you look at Will metrics, Mr. Woolensworth and Jerry Jumbo both seem to have a consistent low level of effort showing up in their meeting volume. Little Debbie's high meeting volumes indicate that she's, in it to win it. There's probably just an opportunity for upskilling. There didn't really seem like there was much of a differentiation in win rate amongst the RIF candidates. We did see that there were some people who outperform in general, which indicated that like maybe we can give them the opportunities that we would be interested in like taking off of other folks. And so if this team needed to reduce headcount, it probably would seem that the right people to do there would be Mr. Woolensworth and Jerry Jumbo, and then potentially Alice Bluebonnet, the rep and ramp, just because oopsie daisy, because it's going to be a while before her bookings are going to start hitting the hitting the bottom line. And so then so you would only do this if you believed you could spread their opportunities and meetings to the rest of the team. We kind of saw that was the case because these folks have like 30 customer facing meetings a month, whereas so there's slack in the team. You can like AE should be able to do anywhere between 50 to 60, maybe even 70 meetings in a month, and this team isn't there. So that's how you would kind of run a hypothetical data-driven reduction in force or right sizing of an AE team here. Richard, anything to add to that? I know I was kind of going fast there.
I don't have too much to add on this example outside of really just setting diligent baselines, setting diligent goals, making sure you have the right numbers in place and getting those numbers out. I don't advise my customers on who I believe should be let go based on their data, but what I'm really, really focused on is here are the numbers that you should be keying in on a daily, monthly, weekly basis. From there, the answer will be clear and you can make your decision. So I spend a lot more time in the sales math sheet, kind of making sure we have the right goals in place and kind of let the customers take over from there.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's something that like, there's another presentation that Masterclass I do on like the problem with sales performance problems, and I think we also have a white paper on it where like if you're doing a good job of measuring and sharing this data to teams, it should be obvious, right? Like in kind of this situation right here, if you're doing a good job of data-driven sales management, like none of this should be a surprise. And moreover, I would argue to you that your reps are generally doing this anyway, but they're kind of doing it more based on vibes than they are based on actual data. As soon as you start deploying the data and making it clear to folks like what the expectations are, and then also just like having transparency into level of effort and level of efficiency, you'd be surprised. Like the reps who kind of have been like mailing it in, you'd be surprised that they end up offboarding themselves proactively, or snapping into line. A little less common. You wish that would be more common. It's a little less common than you would desire. But certainly the high performers are pumped on it, right? Because they're like, that's right. I want recognition for the fact that I'm putting in the calories. So great. So I hope you guys liked this presentation on pivoting to an efficiency first sales organization. This is something that we think quite a bit about at Atrium here, and it's something that our customers are extremely good at. They drive a lot of performance, a lot of performance in through driving better levels of efficiency and execution across their teams. If you want to get a copy of The Qualified Sales Leader by John McMahon and a Coffees for Coaches Yeti mug, we're going to go ahead and drop the link here. Just go ahead and sign up for that. And then, oh, hi, Eduardo. How are you? You're back.
Hi, I'm back.
He's back.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pete and Richard. It's always like a treat to watch your master classes, Pete. I just dropped two links in the chat. One for you audience to sign up for Atrium. It takes less than 5 minutes, and the other one for you to get your goodies that Pete was just sharing. We are going to wrap things up here, but first, I want to thank the audience for attending. You are the best part of MSP, and we hope to keep you coming, attending our future events. Thank you to our wonderful Atrium sponsoring this masterclass today. They are doing great things in there, so be sure to check them out. I just put the link in the chat. And thank you, Pete and Richard, for providing this great content. And audience, again, the recording and key takeaways will be available on our website shortly. And once you're there, don't forget to check our upcoming events. I will see you next time.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
guys. Thank
Have a
you.
good one.